June 15, 2023 meeting of the Downtown Design Review Committee. My name is Gary Jones, and I'm the chair of this year's committee. When called upon, applicants and speakers will come to the front podium to speak. Only one person at a time should come to the podium. Don't approach the podium until vacated by the previous speaker. Speak into the microphone. Please identify yourself and provide your address for the record when you begin speaking. Address your comments, questions, and testimony to the committee. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. It is unnecessary to repeat testimony previously given by others. Citizens may address the committee on agenda items by responding to the chair's call for speakers during the discussion on each item and signing the speaker log on the podium. All comments must be relevant to the item. The chair or the presiding officer, which is me, may in his or her discretion prohibit a person from addressing the committee and/or remove that person from the council chambers if that person commits any disorderly or disruptive behavior. Please see the agenda for more information about these requirements. If you parked in the Sheridan Walker parking garage north of John Rex or in the Arts District parking garage south of City Hall, staff can provide you with a parking validation ticket. Thanks for joining us. The agenda and the documents are located at https://okc.primegov.com/portal/public/portal. You will then select the Downtown Design Review Committee meeting, then click on the agenda item, and the relevant documents will come up below the item. Keith, will you please call the roll?
Jones?
Here.
Brandon? Here. Black? Here. Copeland?
Here.
Serrer? Here. Schmidt? Here. Trujillo?
Here.
All right, we're all here, so we have a quorum. The first item on the agenda is approval of minutes from the April 2023 meeting.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Okay, I have a motion from Tony to approve. Do I have a second?
Copeland, second.
Got a second from Copeland. The vote will come up. Please vote.
Hang on, yeah.
Oh,
And I don't know what happened to the screen, but we'll have to, if you guys can vote, that's fine. It's not, the screen's not showing on this side.
okay. So since the screen is not joined on that side,
Pardon? Well, yeah,
It's-
it's just
yeah,
not
it's
showing
not.
up, so we don't have a record of it.
so do we need to take a public vote, or can we?
Well, we'll wait and see here what happens when it comes back up
Okay.
on this side.
So, Keith, you can just announce that it was unanimously approved.
It was unanimously approved.
Keith, thank you. The minutes were approved. So the next thing on the agenda is cases withdrawn. We have none for today. Next is continuance request. Again, we have none. Next, we have a consent docket where we have none. And next on the agenda, which is cases for individual consideration. The first case up for our review is DTCA-22-00054, R3 at 100 West Main Street. Staff?
Thank you. Let me get to the pictures. Whoa. And I thought I could see it, but I can't because I'm blinded by the light.
Great song, by the way.
So you might recall, we've seen this a few times. Channel 9 studios have moved into, and you had approved some signage. The original sign that they were going to put where the red square was smaller, and then after they got into it, they realized they needed to enlarge it so it actually matches kind of where the Jumbotron is and the address that's going underneath it. So they originally were approved for 400 square feet, and the new one's going to be 627 square feet. And it's perforated metal. It's all painted white. And it lent itself very well for me to do these little pink squares so you can see where it's going. They are going to need a variance because this is an increase on the total square footage that is allowed on the Robinson Street facade. It is a large building. Literally the entire block is a building. You have this building at one end, and you have the hotel at the other end, and in the middle is the parking garage. And staff typically doesn't support more signage than allowed, but given the partial transparent material and the fact that in my opinion, it's going to blend in and won't be a in-your-face fluorescent red type sign, staff has no objection to the request before you. We have a recommendation of approval subject to them getting a variance as stated in the staff report from Board of Adjustment. And then if you will need also a second motion for the recommendation to the Board of Adjustment. We do have representatives from this application. We have legal staff, and then we have the design team representative here as well. Do you have any questions for me?
Seeing no questions for staff, we'll take comments from the applicant at this time.
Good morning, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. So if you recall, before Griffin took over this building, there was a electronic sign that wrapped around the building. We were involved in that. One of the concerns at that point was the Colcord rooms facing that. Since Griffin's taken over, they have revised the sign. The sign is now strictly south-facing, which of course faces the Prairie Media, Cox Center, whatever it's called these days. And so it really didn't have any impact. So although this is, by definition of the code, a sign, it's not electronic, it's not backlit. It really is just a mesh material that will blend in with the balance of the mesh material. So on that basis, we think it's compatible. We think it's an attractive element to the building. It really kind of shields what would be the upper floors of that parking garage. So happy to answer any questions. We do go to the Board of Adjustment this afternoon at 1:30, hopefully, assuming that we get a positive recommendation here this morning.
Are there any questions for the applicant? If there are no questions, I'll take a motion.
I'll move to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District Zoning Ordinance as referenced in Section C and D of the staff report, with the condition that the applicant obtains a variance from the Board of Adjustment from the time limits on super graphics and from the maximum allowable sign area regulations.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Brannon, second.
I have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion passes. We need a second motion in order to request the variance.
And I move to provide a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustments for a variance from the time limits on super graphics and from the maximum allowable sign area regulations.
I have a motion. Need a second?
Brannon, second.
I have a motion and a second. Once again, please vote.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Which then moves us to the second item on the agenda, which is DTCA-22-00085 at 101 Northwest 13th Street. Staff?
Thank you. So the last time you all saw this one might have been, we had a CE several years ago, but I honestly can't remember if it ended up before you. Part of an alley had already been vacated. The north half of this block was not originally in the Downtown Design District. It ended at the east-west alley. They came in with a spud rezoning that did not go before you because it was not in the Downtown Design District. However, that spud specifically stated that it would, let me get the right wording. This was in 2020, and it basically stated that it would go through the design district process, and the base zoning was DTD1. So it was as though it had specifically been zoned into the Downtown Design District. So the entire block, except for the northwest corner, where we have that existing one-story building, is under your purview for design review and approval. The project you have before you today, as you can see, the square, yellow square, is going to kind of surround the two existing buildings. And I'll just kind of go through the slides. Currently, there's grass. There is a north-south alley that you can see that runs up the west side of the garage lofts. But then the rest of the site, although there is some dirt that's now on the site, we have a parking lot that is on the southwest corner that is used, had previously, I don't know if it still is, was used by an adjacent church. And let me keep going. And then you have the garage lofts, which I had indicated in the staff report originally was a car dealership, which I think is kind of fascinating, although technically Automobile Alley kind of doesn't include this area, but this was definitely a car dealership. It was shown as Norton Brothers Buick. And then you have in the northwest corner a building that, a one-story building that had been apparently a dry cleaner at some point. It is boarded up, but everything is still kind of there, although I doubt the windows are, but it has some great brick work. And then just various uses surrounding area. This is to the north, but I understand it's no longer a residential use. And then you have some non-residential uses to the north of 14th Street. This is across to the east, which was part of the DeLisi property. They owned, I'm thinking, all the way up to 15th or 16th maybe. And that has come in and been approved for a PUD. Only the corner is in the downtown design district, and that was not included in the PUD. Everything else around it was to the railroad tracks. And then you have to the south on 13th Street, what is where we had some car dealerships, used car dealerships, and we have some buildings being renovated for non-automobile uses. We have this apartment building that's to the south across 13th Street. And this is also on the south side of 13th Street. So is that one? So let me go back to the aerial's a good one to stop with. So there were two specific areas that they needed to get variances from in this proposal that I discussed in the staff report. One was signage. I think most of us had thought that we'd have the new sign regs by now, but we don't, so we have to use the old ones, which only allow one sign per tenant, no matter how big the building is, even if it was only a single tenant in a building, and they had 2 street frontages, they're only allowed one sign. And it also limits the square footage of signage to 150 square feet. And so when you have a building that's the length of a block, that isn't really proportional to the building. And so we included all of the information about signage from the regulations. So the bank is wanting 2 signs. The bank is going to be on the corner, and the apartments, which is going to wrap the bank, has 3 signs. 2 actually on one on the south facade because they have a sign for their leasing office, and then a sign that's up higher where you would actually see it on the top of the building on that side. So staff supports the request for more than 1 sign per tenant and for increase of total signage. As I was saying, this is a large project. It needs to be proportional to what's there. And we never were supportive of only 1 sign per tenant, but there was nothing we could do about it. So hopefully that will change in the near future. The second item that they're going to need a variance from deals with the fact that they're putting in 2, I'm going to call them trash rooms. So they're going to have one, we're just going to say it's going to be up on 14th Street near where the alley is now. And then they're going to have another one that's on Broadway. And because of the location of where the trash rooms are, the trash trucks will pull in and then back up. So that is called maneuvering in the right-of-way. And you've had other cases where we have had an issue with needing to maneuver in the right-of-way for trash trucks. So the one thing that you probably have not seen before, the conditions we're recommending in conjunction with this, because those came up in River District when the Barkay came in for needing maneuvering in the right-of-way. And by that point, we've been having a lot of trouble with dumpsters being left outside the screened area, dumpsters being left in the right-of-way. And so we now have some conditions that we're including, so those will be new to you. And while recognizing the benefit of having the dumpsters located in trash rooms incorporated into the building, we're concerned that the overhead doors wouldn't be closed after each pickup, and that the dumpster could get placed and left outside of the trash room and possibly within the street right-of-way. To address these concerns, staff would recommend the following conditions: that the overhead doors for the trash rooms shall remain closed at all times. The dumpsters shall not be placed outside the trash rooms or in the street or in the right-of-way. And we're hopeful that including those comments will stop the issues that we've got currently going on in downtown with some large apartment complexes that we're still trying to resolve. The next discussion in the staff report deals with guidelines. And so these are things that staff is pointing out just to the committee. These aren't regulations. They don't need a variance from the Board of Adjustment for any of these. And this deals with, the first one is the applicant proposes, actually, the first and only one, the applicant proposes to construct an office and apartment development of a different architectural character than the existing historic structures on this block and in the surrounding area. And I've included guidelines that talk about, while promoting architectural diversity, we want to encourage design that relates to and reinforces the overall character of the immediate surroundings. And so when I was showing you the pictures, and you could see the older structures that we have there, including the garage lofts that's in the same block, the older building that's on the corner, the apartment that's across the street to the south, the buildings that are to the north. Staff is concerned about the potential negative impact of this structure on those. Now, the structure does meet material requirements. It meets our minimum height requirements. And we're not finding fault with that. We're just suggesting that maybe consideration should be given to more compatibility with the existing structures in the area. So staff gave you some choices, and I did this recently on River, and I think I'm going to have to work on, when I give you choices, making it more clear which ones go together. So one option that staff is recommending would be number one, and that kind of goes by itself. Continue the application to allow the applicant time to address the design concerns discussed in the staff report, and recommended conditions E and F, which I'm getting ready to talk about in a minute, or as directed by the committee. So I kind of just totally skipped over a section that I talked about, which is approvals that they need from other departments and other entities. And that's resulting in the proposed conditions E and F. And I'll just break in by saying they need a CE and subsequent vacation of that north-south alley to be able to do what they want to do, which is build over it. To date, we don't have a CE application that's been submitted. It will come before you for consideration. And so you see the condition E, which says prior to the issuance of a building permit for the parking garage, the applicant obtains a CE from the City of Oklahoma City to close the alley and approval in district court to vacate the alley. The CE application will come back to DDRC for a recommendation to the Planning Commission. And the second thing is they're proposing to add angle parking on 14th Street, which is going to require them, they're proposing to move the curb. So you don't have any purview curb to curb, so if they weren't moving the curb, that wouldn't be a condition, but they're having to move the curb to accommodate those angled spaces. So because of that, we can actually make this. So we have a condition, the applicant obtains the necessary approval from the Oklahoma City Traffic and Transportation Commission and City Council for angled parking on Northwest 14th Street. And so those are included in addition to the dumpster conditions that I previously read from you, in addition to conditions about the variance, about the signs, and about maneuvering in the right-of-way. And so that's A through F that you see. And so if you choose to do that one, Then you need to include 3, which would be to provide a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustment for those 2 variances that I spoke about. So, on that note, and we do have people here representing architects here, owner/attorneys here, and other people are here on that project. So, do you have any questions for staff, or did I just totally confuse you with?
No,
all of
just
those.
for clarification for me is that there are some pending issues. Do I have this on? Oh, it fell. This is my best day here. That there were, for me, there were some questions that normally when we get to this point and we're having this conversation, a lot of these issues have been resolved. There appears to be some pending issues that at least need to be worked through or talked through, which of course would help us in making a decision on what to do with the application. The initial recommendation was the possibility of a continuance in order to provide time in order for these conversations to take place. And I know that the applicant has individuals here to speak to that I'd like to hear that, because don't want to say waste. That's an unfair description. But if there is the ability in order to go back and have a conversation about some of these pending issues, that might be a better utilization of everyone's time, with hopefully a recommendation to come back with some potential resolution of the issue. And I know that that is based on conversations with those that are engaged with the project. That would be my first thought. And then second with that, if there is some time requirement, which allows maybe some components of this that need to be approved, that maybe the applicant can talk about those when they come and do their presentation. That was just my thought.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other? Is there any other questions before, I guess, that we turn it over to the applicant? Or did you want to turn it over to the applicant right now before anybody
I was ready
else
to turn it
starts?
over to the applicant
Okay.
to see what their response were to what I threw out there. That would, in my opinion, provide context, or at least a framework for the conversation moving forward.
If you would please identify yourself. Thank you.
My name is, excuse me, Rick Brown, 521 West Wilshire. I'm the architect for the project, and we have our...
I actually listened to a meeting from a few weeks ago.
We have our civil engineer, project architect for the project, and scores of other people here interested in our application. The project itself, if you could, where's my?
Oh, I am so sorry. They do have a presentation. Let me
Okay.
get to, and okay, I have to click this, and it takes a minute. And then I can't see, sorry.
That's okay. This is our site plan, and as Laura described, we have 3 sides of the project. On the bottom, on the south face, is Northwest 13th Street. East is Broadway, Robinson, and 14th Street. We really, in deference to Gary, it sounds like we have a lot of issues. We really, signage is one issue, and maneuvering space. We have a trash room in the kind of bottom corner, and a trash room in the top corner, which requires some maneuvering of the trash truck to get trash out. And with their conditions that the overhead doors stay closed, we don't have any problem with any of the conditions that they place. So, you know, that's one. The signage is another, and we understand that the signage ordinance is going to be revised. So we're really not asking for a lot of signage, just, you know, adequate signage for both the bank and for the apartment complex. And it is a big project. It wraps all the way around all 4 sides with in my mind, one of the issues with staff was that we could continue it to make our design more cohesive with the neighborhood, and I don't know what we would actually make it more cohesive with. As you saw from Laura's pictures, it's a very eclectic neighborhood, so there's a lot of different things going on. So this being a part of the Innovation District, our concept was to make it a modern, urban, walkable neighborhood that really addressed that component of the design and not tried to say, oh, this is adjacent to Heritage Hills, or this is an appendage to the loft apartments, but it is something that Oklahoma City has been making an effort to become new and modern and urban, and I think this project addresses that. Next slide, please, Laura.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was just,
Do I have it?
you have it, and you can just pull the wheel.
Great. This is a shot from the corner of Broadway and Northwest 13th and showing the loft garage in the center, the core bank building, which would be brick and ACM panels. It's a 7-story, 61,000 square foot building. Core bank would occupy the bottom 2 floors, and there's a rooftop restaurant that would be on the top of it that has some outdoor seating areas that overlook downtown. The garage lofts building, we've kind of framed it with the apartment buildings, and it's kind of like putting a parenthesis over an important sentence. It sort of emphasizes it. And one of the ways to relate buildings is with scale, and our apartments are 4 and 5 stories, which very, very well coincide with the height of the garage building, and I think really emphasize that that's an important building in the middle of the block on 13th Street. The materials of the apartments are primarily brick and plaster. You can see again, that's the 13th and Robinson view of the project. We've got 2 different colors of brick and a matching color of white stucco on the building as well. This is the view from 14th and Broadway. You can see the balcony, or the patios at the first level are metal framed with wood slats. And so it gives you a very kind of modern, urban, walkable environment for even the first floor. On 14th Street here, you can see that we've added parking all along 14th Street. The other 3 sides of the building already have parking off the street on them. So we've got streetscape, landscaping, and parking on the angled parking on the 14th Street. One of the issues that Laura brought up was that we have a right here, this is an alley that we're in the process of vacating right now. We have the garage loft, they're on board with that, and so we're opening that up for traffic so that the people from the garage lofts primarily can get through to 14th Street. So their access point is right in here that goes, it has indoor parking inside the building, so they'll be able to go either to 13th or 14th Street from there. That is in progress. I mean, it'll take a while to get it, to the finish line, but we feel like that will happen for the project. This is an elevation on 13th Street that shows what I was talking about on the garage lofts. It frames around it with the parking garage in the center Behind it, the parking garage is not exposed to any one of the 3 streets, so it kind of sits in the background. The garage lofts building is framed with those buildings, and you can see that the scale of it's very much in keeping with what we're doing on the apartment buildings. This is our material palette. We've got, brick, stucco, cast stone, and Alucobond ACM panels. This is our signage breakdown. Total signage we have is 209.2 square feet on the project. Again, these are just, the various color elevations of the building, walking around the building. And that's kind of a summary of the project. That's a quick summary, and it's a big project, so we want to answer your questions. We've got people here that can answer the questions I can't, and we appreciate your consideration, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Rick. I'll start off is that when we look at the development guidelines, it does talk about the guidelines are intended to promote the development and redevelopment of downtown area in a manner that is consistent and compatible with existing unique and diverse design elements of downtown Oklahoma City that encourages economic development and commerce. When you look at that and you see the proposed structure and you see the garage in the middle there seems to be some incompatibility with that. So I'd like for staff to talk about what their recommendations are, at least their assessment of this project and its compliance with those developmental guidelines.
And I'm going to let Katie answer that, but before I do, in this view they've got up here, it actually shows the 1-story building that's in the northwest corner.
Yes.
And I think visually there's more of a difference in the impact than on the garage lofts because it's bigger. But I saw Katie was just ready to jump in and answer your question, Gary.
Yeah, sure. So, there are lots of different ways to get to compatibility. That can be materials, it can be color palette, it can be proportion, it can be scale, spacing of bays of windows and doors. We, certainly, as it says in the staff report, would never ask an applicant to come in and mimic existing buildings on a site, historic buildings on the site. But we felt like in looking at the overall design, that they could pick and choose one or more of those different components of compatibility and maybe communicate a little better between the proposed building and the existing buildings that are on the site, as well as some of the historic buildings that are in the immediate surrounding area that are architecturally diverse, but also are very similar to each other in their materials and in their proportions. So that is, staff didn't, as we, you can see in the staff report, we didn't have a specific list of they need to change these 7 things. We just opened that up to the design committee. We have a great group of design professionals here to say there may be some things that could be more consistent and compatible with the existing buildings that we're incorporating. And the one other thing I'll note is that what's a little bit different about this project versus some of the other new construction that we've seen is the way that it wraps around the existing buildings. If these buildings were across the street, I think we would have a different reaction to or a different level of concern about the extent to which this new project communicates with existing buildings. But because it does kind of encapsulate what's already there, we thought that it was just really important to call attention to assessing the extent to which the new design talks to the existing buildings.
So, Rick, good news for you is I am actually the at-large member here and not one of the design professionals. So I will, at this point, let the design professionals chime in on their thoughts concerning the application. Oh, do not be hesitant.
definitely agree that we don't want to mimic what's adjacent. And if there was any kind of indication of something that would maybe be a hint, just a slight hint. And I do think that some of the things that you've done have already done it. Some of your alignments are hitting parapets and hitting windows. I think some of the materiality that you show, it might read differently in actual real life than the way that it does here in stark whites and grays. I can argue this both ways. I can argue, especially on the other side, on the south-facing side, I didn't necessarily feel like we needed to do much of anything unless, again, it was a hint of something that may already be accomplished with respect to the alignments that you've done with the horizontal elements. I don't like near misses. I don't like, well, I try to be close, but not hit, because then it's going to look like you fouled it. So I'd rather see contrast, contrast of materials. I also realize that this building needs to represent itself as one, so we shouldn't be trying to transition as we go around the building and let the north corner look different than the south facade. So, and now on the other side, I would embrace if there was some small additional hint that was just to where somebody walking by says, these two feel nice together, they play in the sandbox really, really well. Right now there's a little more contrast than that. But my initial opinion is, even with the low 1-story against the 5-story, this is the development that we want. We would hope that if something happened on that north corner, that it would be 5 stories as well, or even taller. So I think we're heading in the right direction with the scale. And again, I think you're going in the right direction. If it was something that needed to be done, I would rather see it be slight and still stay contrast than try to get close and create a scenario in which there's some kind of a mess. That was my approach on it. Those are my thoughts. I'd love to hear any more.
I think the first thing that stuck out to me was the cool palette versus the warm existing palette. That's what I saw the most contrast in. So I don't know if the hint comes from color. I don't have an answer, but I also agree that I think the development is very much, like, we're excited about it. So to appease what we're looking for of the being a part of the neighborhood and not standing out too much. I mean, we want you to stand out. You're going to be new and fresh, and we're excited about the new vision that where this area is going. I don't know. I agree. I see the lines that you're aligning with. I think that's a really nice touch. But the color is the most thing for me, and I don't really have an answer. I don't not like it, but I understand, like, our requirement to kind of complement the neighborhood.
Yeah, we thought about that a lot, Kayla, and as Anthony said, to try to mimic materials, to me it looked like a near miss, like as he said, and our thought was as a designer on where the garage lofts is, and I really, the 1-story building, I really think that, I mean, our clients have tried to purchase that and incorporate it into this project, but the ownership is, one day she says, yeah, we want to do that, and the next day she's not, so she's older, and we don't know what'll happen with that. The garage lofts, on the other hand, our opinion of that was to try to match the lines, or not necessarily match, but to create a situation where that was framed, like, parenthetically, that's framed between our two buildings. And it kind of goes around it and emphasizes that's, it's different, but the scale of it is very much similar to what we're doing, and it gives you that kind of nice scale to the building, and the garage. We'd like for it to, in fact, my clients have also thought about purchasing that building and cleaning it up and incorporating it into our project. So we think it's a good match. We think it's a good fit, and we think that our project really goes a long way towards integrating that whole facade by lining it up and creating lines that are similar. We think that that makes for a nice cohesive statement on that elevation.
Other questions?
No. I have just a couple comments. Could you tell me what the southwest corner floor plan looks like and then the northeast corner of the site floor plan looks like? I'm assuming that they're apartment units. Just wanting to see from a floor plan level, like what that looks like, what that.
Southwest, okay, let's see. Well, that is the southwest corner of the project, and
I don't
It's-
believe they included the floor plans in their presentation,
well,
but you can,
Yeah, I think-
you can get to them
Yeah,
on your side.
yeah. Just want to make sure that the public sees what. There we go. Okay.
yeah, it's right down here.
Sure.
and
Oh, I'm
that-
sorry, they did. I apologize. That was the
Yeah,
one I was going to.
it won't enlarge, but that's this is an entrance off of 13th Street to the project, and this is a two-bedroom unit on the corner all the way up, and this wing is our 5-story wing on this end, and this is also that gave us a little bit more density that made the project work economically, honestly. And this is a courtyard in between with a dog park and a pickleball court in the interim, in that interstitial space. And the other portion of the project has a big landscaped area, barbecue area, swimming pool with cabanas and other site amenities in the interior.
And were you wanting to know about the units that were in the northeast
just
corner?
Specifically the units on the corner. I
Yeah.
think as we, as this is an entry into Midtown, as this kind of, as Core Bank takes the corner, you have 7 stories on that corner. You have this great glass facade on that corner. I think that I would like to see on that southwest corner and on that northeast corner a little bit more of some balance in that, right? Because I think you have a lot of brick on that facade, also on that corner. And so when you look at 13th Street as a whole, you see, Gardner's a block away. You have Harvey Bakery that has it approachable, like to the public, right? We have 300 units. We have 300 residences going to be in this apartment complex. Walking to and from. Is there a way that we can make those two corners more approachable that balances with 13th Street that are at this kind of 2-story level, glass facade level, to the street, people walking to and from? Does that make sense? Like, am I?
Yeah, I understand that, and I think that's a good comment. We are currently looking at, one of our owners made a comment that, especially on the southwest corner, not so much with the northeast, but the southwest corner, that side has some great views to downtown. So, one of the things that we're working on now is kind of taking that end and opening it up a little bit for more windows, just as you suggested.
Yeah. Even if the corner itself was more of the unit's patio space, and I am not the floor plan expert here, and I will not claim to be. So just thinking if that corner was potentially the patio space and versus a bedroom where you do have cars that are traveling on
Sure,
13th Street.
sure.
So maybe that's not the bedroom and maybe the living space or outdoor living space. Maybe flipping that.
Yeah, well, I think those are good comments, and those are things that we are looking at right now. So I strongly suspect that'll get incorporated into the final plan, at least on that end. And and perhaps even on the other end. We'll take a look at both of those and get some windows in.
So
You
if
know,
they
in
do
there.
make that revision, it's possible it could be a revision done administratively by staff depending on percent?
Yeah.
Because as long as the percentages are less than 20% of the overall project, we could do it administratively, especially if it's something you guys have talked about here in the meeting. So, you know, we know it was a suggestion on your part.
Other questions and comments?
I do have a comment. When you're looking at the building, it's great, and it looks like.
Is your microphone on? It might be.
Oh, there you go, sorry. So it's a great building. I like how it looks. It looks really clean, and it's really, really great. One thing that I was thinking, there's like the design itself, when you think of Bricktown, when you look at this building inside, look at all the details. There's details everywhere. One thing that I was thinking, the brick is just black and white. Is there anything that can be integrated with the design of the white just to kind of be zigzagged or something? Make it interesting enough to people just walk by and say, oh,
Yeah.
it's a great, maybe it's nothing, but when I see the lines, it's just straight lines, straight bricks. Can you know,
Well,
Design
you know,
something to make it
one of the
a little
things that we have done, Rosie, and I think your comments, well, you know, is well taken, that, you know, some of those kind of insets, you can even see that on the garage lofts building, there's some cast stone kind of ornament in it, and while we didn't want to get too crazy with it, because our building does have this long linear context, you know, what we've done is say on the office building where it's very prominent, we've done some cast stone insets. They're linear, you know, but and we've done that around the building, and we can do more of that with the cast stone insets, and we'll study that also. I think that's a point well taken, that, you know, that's something that goes a long way towards coordinating that level of detail that we're trying to in the project. So I think that's a good comment and something that we've tried to address, but we'll explore that even more through the construction drawing process.
thank you.
Any additional comments?
I think, first of all, I'd like to say congratulations on getting it this far. An unbelievably complicated piece of real estate development.
It is.
And we recognize that and appreciate your efforts to date. In particular, all of the partners that you're bringing to this property. I think you've done tremendous efforts on very smart urban design principles, locating a parking garage in the middle of the plan, wrapping it with use and activation that's genuinely appreciated, both from our committee and also, I'm sure, Heritage Hills to the north. I think I've thought a lot about this application, and as an architect, I'm never going to tell you how to design a building, not my purview. But I'm hearing a sense of jarring between this project and immediate context of the garage. And I love that we're not trying to mimic history. None of us can build buildings like that anymore. And I love that you say it's modern. I just think perhaps if there's a way to notionally gesture towards it, it's a warm brick building with vertical aspect windows that have broken down into smaller divided lights. It very obviously shows its structural grid on the outside of the building. It's an honest representation of what's going on the inside and the outside. I think part of what is jarring about your building articulation is you inherently have a very vertically massed building with balconies that align vertically, windows that align vertically, and then you've applied a horizontal gesture, a painting of horizontality onto it, which I think is what's jarring on that south elevation. And so I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but you might consider reinforcing a more honest material approach on your project, because your massing and your materiality isn't necessarily aligning. And I think that's what's jarring against the garage building on the south. The second thing I would say is, and I think this committee is going to start getting tired of me saying this, is I am a massive proponent of street trees. I think the renderings are great. It shows a lot of street trees, but the renderings don't necessarily align with what you're showing on your site plan. And I think Oklahoma City has this amazing document called Putting Down Roots that describes all of the different types of trees and their correct applications. And I would challenge you to go back and look, because I think you've got the correct quantities, but not the right structural element on what the tree is doing. So providing shade for pedestrians that are walking by, large enough that encourages cars to slow down as they drive by. It'll be a gift to our future generations, but it'll be a gift to your investors, because when cars drive slower, your rent rates go up, people want to be there, you get beautiful birds singing in the springtime. So I would just, for me, I would like the street tree strategy to be strengthened. And also on the 14th Street side, where we've added some angled parking, we could introduce a couple tree wells on that elevation too. That'd be really useful. But overall, I will say, like, a tremendous development, a very difficult challenge. I think we're splitting hairs here on a couple items.
Yeah, and I agree with that. We have, there are a few of those things that will challenge us in the final phase of the project to, strengthen our design. I think at this point, I do think it's a great project, great development, and we just need to, tweak it that last 1% to get it to, be a really outstanding project. So I appreciate your comments, and I also am a big proponent of the street tree setup, and we will do our best to continue that and make that a strong point of the project.
Other questions or comments? Seeing as there are none, are there any individuals from the public that would like to speak to this project? Please come forward. State your name.
Thank you, Chairman Jones.
We got you. You're good.
Let me, sorry, I'm in.
Uh-oh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm one of the co-owners of the property. This cake's been in the oven a long time. We acquired this on Halloween 2018. We've been through so many iterations and many studies. I wanted to say to you, Chairman Jones, that you commented early on that it looked like it was a little concerning that staff didn't give us a outright approval. It was sort of a bit of a mixed report, although largely we're quite happy with their determinations and conditions we're amenable to. And so we're going to accept Laura's proposed those technical revisions. We are at a point where, well, I should also, let me just say that we've had extensive talks with both of the owners of the other two buildings on this block, and it has obviously been challenging, as Mr. Schmidt noted. It's an odd configuration, but it really does need to be developed on a unitary basis. And that was a very difficult, tricky thing for Rick and his team to conceive and execute, and we feel like they've done just the best possible job for that. I think that Rick did a fine job of paying homage to the garage and not trying to dwarf it. It's pretty well aligned, and so from a massing and scale standpoint, that's outside my field, but I feel like that's probably as appropriate an approach as one could take. We would respectfully ask if the committee would please consider granting general approval, subject to working out, executing the technical amendments that Laura proposed, and with the understanding that there will be yet a few things that hopefully could be negotiated administratively in order to give a little bit of a homage to what's there without any massive redesign. So if we're successful, if you all are amenable to that, it would aid us greatly in finishing our pro formas and getting on with the process of closing our funding. So that's my request. We are working with the Alliance, and Lena from the Alliance is here today, and they are supportive of our application as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. LeBar.
Conditions that address the variances they need and conditions we've attached to that and other approvals they need. And it is not uncommon for you all to approve a CA with conditions such as this, and then staff makes sure that it's carried out. You've also added things in the past, and sometimes you add things that you address, you have the applicant work stuff out with staff. So I was just going to mention that because there were some suggestions you made that they seemed amenable to, and they're working on it, but they're not really sure where it's landing. So if you felt strongly about those, you could always add that, and then that would be something that staff would also make sure get resolved. And if you need help with wording, we can help you with that.
The other thing that I'll note is that we are not able to issue a CA for this until they have the CE, correct?
Until it's been actually vacated.
Yes, we can't issue a certificate of approval to build a building where there is currently a public alley. So,
Well,
no matter.
actually, and we could check with legal on this. The condition I've got is that a building permit would not be issued, because that's the issue.
Yeah, so technically, we can issue the CA.
CA, yes.
With the condition that they close the alley.
And vacate.
Close and vacate the alley. They can't get a building permit till that's done. Closing the alley will come back to you all for another design review meeting. So just based on the, not complexity as far as a great amount of work, but the complexity as far as the kind of discretionary components of what was discussed today. You know, this wasn't add a window here, add a door over there. These were a lot of very kind of design-based conceptual suggestions that were made to the applicant. If you all felt like you needed to see it again, you're going to see this project again as part of the application to close the alley. So that is another option to say, you know, come back with some of these revisions that have been discussed today at the same time as it comes back through for the CE. I understand the applicant wanting to get a thumbs up and be able to move forward, but I also want the committee to feel comfortable that the changes that you're wanting to see are addressed.
So does that mean that in section E of the recommendation for the application, is that consistent, or is that language okay in order to meet that requirement as far as the CE related to the alley, closing the alley?
I read it as Katie and Lori just
Okay.
described to you. I think it looks good.
Okay.
As far as how they have it in the report.
Yep, just
Thank
want to
you.
make sure. Members?
I do think that we should at least clarify, because we had a lot of discussion up here that all seemed to revolve around some slight adjustments that were preferable, that would allow, I used a hint, but I heard a lot of very great comments about it. We're just going to have some kind of reference, not large-scale design changes. It could be color palette, it could be the kind of the structural appearance of the building within the original context of the design and the layout, but just a visual structural adjustment to address the horizontality of your building versus verticality, and then also a conversation about corners on the north, east, and southwest, and whether there could be some additional transparency with respect to how those corners presented themselves on the street.
There was also street trees.
And then I was going to say, and very much so, I think that that's an excellent comment. Is that acceptable to staff? Is it acceptable to the applicant to work out those items in the absence of bringing it back to us?
Well, first, let's work up the wording.
Okay.
So I heard you say the visual structural appearance, horizontal versus vertical.
I think the intent is that there is some kind of visual reference to the adjacent aesthetic. And that could be done either in color palette or proportion. Or detailing. Something that gives a reference to the adjacent structure, but still maintains its individuality.
Okay, so you said some kind of visual reference to the adjacent aesthetic, which could be color palette. Did you say appearance or detail?
Proportion
Proportion instead of appearance, okay.
or
Proportion.
detailing.
So while Laura's writing, I want to clarify that what I was intending to say was we could continue this because it's going to have to come back for the CE anyway. And to me, this is beyond what we do at a staff level. Just the level of discussion that was had up here today, the level of kind of design thought that was suggested. I personally feel like that's something that the committee needs to see again.
Yeah, and the
Now,
one,
it could be something that you all see again, that it's approved with a condition that those revisions come back to you as part of approving the CE, or I'll defer to legal if that's something we can do as part of a condition, but.
I think there's a timing issue involving funding,
Okay.
and that we might want to hear from them on.
Sure.
I was asked specifically, like, if it got continued, then typically they would have to resubmit everything by next Tuesday to make it on your next month's meeting. So normally, when you have a project and you continue it for redesign, it's going to be 2 months. And so that would be to the, I worked it out, but now, to the August 17th meeting. So, I mean, that's 2 months down the road. But I just thought we needed to probably hear from them on the timing issue.
Yeah, we have an issue with our, with our loan situation that they're not going to commit to the loan on the project until we have an approval from this board. So, I mean, we're willing to make some minor detail changes, and we're happy to, to work with Laura and carry out the spirit of what this board's talking about. We would like to get that approval today, even if it has some conditions with it that we work through a couple of minor items. I mean, I don't want to go back to the drawing board and redesign the entire project, but material changes and some details and looking at the I think what creates the horizontal emphasis of the project is really the break in the bands and the break of the brick, and carries that around, and we can look at that. And the garage lofts building also has a kind of a horizontal element and a vertical element with the bay expression in it. So there's a precedent for having that duality of horizontal and vertical element in a structure. So, I think that, there are some detail things that we can incorporate into our building that do reference the garage lofts. But again, I don't want to go so far as to say, okay, well, it looks like they sort of tried to, match the garage lofts building, but it doesn't, So I don't want to get to that point, but we can study some facade details that give it that scale and some of that detail that's in that garage lofts building that I think will go a long way towards making it look like it's at least a distant cousin to the garage lofts. And I really would like to study that. I want to study Justin's suggestion that we, have some more transparency on the corners. I think that's something good and something we're already looking at. So I think those two things specifically are are very valid and things that we would want to look at in our continuing design exercise. But as far as the overall massing and, you know, the look of the building, I mean, I think it's good. I think we've got a good project, and it's been a hard project to get to this point, as Eric said. I mean, an extremely difficult project. I've been working on this since 2018, so it's been a 5-year-long journey for me, and to get to this point is pretty significant.
So can I make a suggestion? I've actually never done this before, and I didn't even talk to Katie. Is it possible that we add a condition that basically states that the elevations that it's going to require them to, they're going to get approval, but it's going to require them to come back with all these changes we talked about. But you issue the approval today, we've got all of these conditions, and so all we have to do is work out the wording of that condition, so that we cover the street trees, we cover adding the glass in the north east and the southwest corner, and we cover the issue of the color palette, the proportion, the detailing, and have that in there, basically saying they're going to come back with revised elevations that are going to address these things. But you're going to issue approval subject to that condition. That way, hopefully, you guys will end up getting what you want. It'll come back to you. It's not going to delay them right now from getting their approval, because apparently it's based on you getting approval, as long as that type of approval will work.
So
Yes?
if I can make a couple of comments.
Okay.
One is, I was thinking the easy way out was to continue, but I realized that there are other factors that would probably be better for us to go ahead and approve. I'm going to be honest, I think you guys have really done a really good job of trying to meet all the different needs and requirements, and more important, opinions of individuals about this particular project. And to me, whenever an entity does that, it shows that you have good intent. And I know that we have brought up a whole series of things that we would like to see that we think could improve the project. My hope is, members, that we could do an approval of the applications based on the recommendations from staff. I'm not sure that we have to have the wording right, as long as staff has enough information in order to ensure that the suggestions are being considered and what will be finally submitted to us as far as the design review committee. As I know that you're trying to get it right, Laura, I'm not sure.
Well, because when I issue the CA, they're going to get this list of things, and it needs to tell them what they have to do.
So I guess what I'm saying is, I think the list of things is the most important part. I'm not sure that we actually have to make sure that we've got the right list worded in the right way to make sure that's being done. I think through the conversations and the responses that we have received from the applicant, and I think that there's been great input and feedback from the members, that there's enough there in order to have the conversations that need to be held, is my thought. Because I'm not sure we're going to get the right wording right now, but I know that we want to have at least a list of things to be considered as the application is being finalized.
Can I add something as well? I feel like the list we created, not everything has to be implemented too. I want to make sure that that's clarified. I don't feel like everything on our list needs to be applied for this to be approved either. I think just little bits and pieces of whatever Rick, okay, feels is appropriate through his long study of this site, I would be very comfortable with that. So I just wanted to clarify that too. Though we had a list, I don't think everything needs to be implemented on it. Those are our suggestions from today.
And to that point, I think that's a good point, and I think we've gotten some great input from the board, from the design professionals, and those things we'll take back, and we will consider those carefully in our, positing our elevations for final approval and submittal by the city. And some of them may not be compatible with one another. I mean, we may put some cast stone details in there and say, yeah, that looks like we're trying to do what we're trying to do, which is match an old building. But then it might look like, yeah, that looks good. So, I don't want to have some list that says, you have to do this, 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 and this. That's, sort of antithetical to what architecture is. I mean, we need to be able to take your suggestions, look at those suggestions, implement what we think makes the project better, because I think there are some of those things, some of the things Eric and Anthony brought up, some of the things Kayla said, and Justin. I mean, there are all good, valid points for us to consider. But to make a list and say, you have to do this, 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 and this, I mean, if that's the way we get to approval, then that's what we'll do. But, I think our intent is to make this the best project that we can make it and be, consonant with what you guys want it to be. We want to be good stewards of the city, and I think that by giving this project the kind of character that we're giving it and putting this money into the project, I think we've demonstrated that's what we're here to do. So, good comments, good things for us to look at, and we'll look at them.
So-
And maybe it's that in the approval, Laura writes that, things to consider are X, 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 and X, and we'll do that. And we're happy to bring that back to you and show you what we've done even. That's not a problem, because our intent is to really study those things and make the project better.
So, members, I need a motion and some guidance
Yeah,
as
staff's
far
going to
as-
need specific wording.
Yes.
So I think I want to clarify from the committee, because what I'm hearing from the applicant is we'll take those suggestions and we'll consider them, but staff needs to know the extent to which that's an open-ended suggestion versus a requirement that they make changes. I was writing out a possible condition to say that revisions addressing the following comments be resubmitted to DDRC, either to staff or the committee. I would leave that up to you all with your level of comfort with it being referred to staff, or if you want to see it again for final inclusion in the certificate of approval, with those comments being relationship to the surrounding building design. I think that encapsulates the discussion.
Does.
Transparency at corners, and utilization of street trees as noted by the committee and referenced in the staff report. But what I think we need to pin down is that just an open-ended recommendation to them? Is that a referral to staff to work through those details? Is that something that we're bringing back to the committee to review?
Go ahead.
I think what you're trying to get approval on is really the structural component of the building. We're not talking about changing floor plans.
Right.
We're not talking about changing alignments of roadways or ingress and egress, floor-to-floor heights, scale. Those things stay. We're talking about the true envelope aesthetic only. And I think in that light, it can come back and we can see it again and see and allow you to move forward with the understanding that it is contingent upon these elements coming back before us just to see how that played out. And that way it's not putting staff in a position where they feel like they're being asked to do something that might be a little bit out in front of their skis, but we allow you to move forward with all the things that you're trying to achieve for today.
So Tony, are you okay with the language that Katie was
Yes, I am.
drafting? Okay.
With the revision to say it's directing back to staff,
To
which
staff,
is what I
yes,
heard you
with
say.
reversion to staff.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it
Are you
would,
saying to committee?
Well,
I'm
to
saying
work-
it would, staff would work through all the details
yes,
and staff would get to the point where they're comfortable and then
Right.
just show it to us.
exactly.
And I would expect, because your best interest is for this to be a successful project and present itself well. So if you make reference to the adjacent building in a way that's pleasing to you, and it's pleasing to staff, then I think that we're going to be able to see that in the final product. And that way, we get the opportunity to see it, and staff doesn't feel like they're the ones with the responsibility to make that final call.
Can I ask Katie to read that one more time? This will become G.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Say that again, Laura. What?
This will become G. Can you
Okay,
read that one
yes.
more time?
So,
And- Yes.
Condition that revisions addressing the following comments be resubmitted to the Downtown Design Review Committee for final review: relationship to surrounding building design, transparency at corners, and utilization of street trees as noted by the committee and referenced in the staff report.
Is that acceptable to the client?
I don't like that it says just building design components maybe. You know, building design is very open-ended, I think, in terms of a very blanket sort of, yeah, we can force you to redesign the whole building, and I don't want it to say that. I would rather
Building
say design components.
Design components?
Yeah.
Is okay. Katie's got
I have no
that?
objection to that.
Okay. So Katie's gotten this written down. Laura?
Yes, so that will become G,
Yes.
in addition to A through F that's already in there,
Yes.
okay?
And then we have the recommendation to the Board of
Yeah,
Adjustments
you'll
for
have two
variance.
motions.
Exactly. Correct.
Okay.
All right. Eric? Yes.
You can just say, you can say conditions A through G as noted in the staff report and read into the record by staff, unless Stephen tells me no.
Would you be okay saying A through F?
Can you
as-
read that? Yes.
and
Eric can
then
do that and then add.
Read
Yes.
this one.
That was what I was going to go with, just for the record.
Okay.
All right.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report, with the conditions that, as noted, A through F in the staff report, and G, approve with condition that revisions addressing the following comments be resubmitted to DDRC for final review: relationship to the relationship to the surrounding building design components, transparency at corners, and utilization of street trees as noted by the committee and referenced in the staff report.
Was writing that for me, not for other people.
Thank you.
Copeland, second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Thank you.
Motion passes,
Thank you.
which
We have
brings
another
us,
motion. So now we need the second motion.
yes, on the variance. Do I have a motion?
I'll provide a motion to provide a recommendation of the Board of Adjustment, recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustment for a variance from maximum allowable sign area, regulation limiting the number of signs to one sign per tenant, and the prohibition against parking or maneuvering in the public right-of-way.
Second?
Copeland, second.
Vote. Motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, anything else on this before we move to the next item on the agenda?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Committee.
Okay. All right, next item on the agenda is DTCA-23-0026 at 1 Myriad Gardens.
Give me a second. I need the screen to change so I can pull up the, yeah, it
No.
is now.
Yeah, sorry,
But hang on.
please bear with me. That's actually DTCA-23-00019 at 1010 North Oklahoma Avenue. Thank you.
Hang on a second. And sorry, once again, I forgot to introduce myself. Laura Griggs, Planning Department, since none of you know who I am.
Thank you, Laura.
No problem. So you guys have seen this twice in the last year or so. Once it got zoned into the Downtown Design District, and we're very excited that it did. This was leftover I-235 right-of-way that DOT had, and the Alliance, Okura, I'm not sure what hat they were wearing at the time, acquired it. And then it came through for a CE to close the Northeast 9th Street right-of-way and an alley that was north and south of that. And at that time, there was discussion that they were going to be having a temporary use on it, which is a parking lot, for a business that is currently renovating a building down near the tracks on 9th Street. So what you have before you today is that parking lot. So it's here at the intersection of 10th and Oklahoma, and we have 235 on the one side, and right now it's just grass. And so there's just a few slides in here, and we'll just go back to this one. So the reason you're seeing this is because it is a parking lot on a corner, and there's a guideline against that. You've had several, and I won't list them all, but I do talk about them in my staff report. I go back, I think, to 2016, and so we've had several that have come in. In some cases, it was a business across the street. You might remember that one on Classen Boulevard, and they came in to do a really difficult site to put a parking lot that had a really tough grade. But they acknowledged that they were growing so fast they would probably be building a building on top of it within a few years. And then we had one for the rescue mission, was probably the most recent one we had, and it was located within their campus, and they really needed a central location for their parking that was secured for staff and for their clients to park on. And those have all been approved. So we still believe that prominent street corners such as this one should be reserved for buildings. However, in this case, constructing a temporary parking lot on this site will allow growth of the area currently because you have this business moving in and they need the parking. And as you know, we don't require parking. So they really could move in without it, but their workers need a place to park, while at the same time keeping development options open and not impede the construction of the future building. So Acura has acknowledged at some point, you know, they put property out, they get RFPs, what's the highest and best use? Obviously, it's not a parking lot, but they're coming through with this parking lot. One of the things I'm gonna point out to you that we've not seen before is we actually have a detention. You might have noticed on the site plan that there's a detention pond, a detention area that is adjacent to Oklahoma. So I think that's something we're going to start seeing more of as a public works requirement in certain areas of downtown. So with that being said, oh, okay. And I was looking, but there were so many people here, I didn't see. We do have people representing this from both the owner side and from the design side. And I think the tenant representative, yes, yeah, here, if you have questions for them. But do you have any questions for staff? As I said, it only came before you because of the guideline against parking lots on corners. They meet everything. They got landscaping. They meet the dimensional requirements.
Are there questions for staff?
Do we have record on how long the lease is for the temporary use?
No, because that was not part of staff. They're indicating it's temporary. It's not a requirement, it's just information we're providing to you all because that's what the owner had indicated. I mean, obviously you can ask them. Your approval typically is not tied to a specified time frame. I've not had that come up with this body to the best of my knowledge. I've had it come up with River on some other things. But if you would like that information, I think they could provide that to you.
And do we have record from public utilities of requiring detention?
That's Public Works Department requirement. It actually came up on a project you approved after you approved it that is impacting it. They're having to look at some major redesign over in Midtown right now because of the requirement, so we're going to start seeing it more. And so hopefully people are going to start going to them before they come to us so that their design that you see is the final design that actually incorporates the detention.
Going from this much permeability to the majority of it being impervious, I can see where they would have, and I know that there's a new detention ordinance that is either rolling out but the only other option is subgrade, and it would not be, I mean, it wouldn't be financially responsible to do it in a temporary situation. For a permanent, maybe, but yeah.
Okay, are there additional questions or comments?
Were you wanting an answer on the lease question?
I'd love one, just because I think if we're going to notionally discuss a temporary use, it'd be nice to know what the time of the temporary is, because temporary could mean 10 years, 20 years, 50 years.
Okay.
Okay, if the applicant will come forward.
You got the property owner's representative here.
Got it.
Which mic do I use?
The
The
big
one
one.
that's in your face, yes.
Good morning, Cassie Port, the Alliance for Economic Development. We manage the Urban Renewal Authority, who is the property owner. I believe the lease is for 5 years with the potential of extension. You know, right now the economic climate is not great for building new buildings. We know that. I think what's important to remember is this was a site that was owned by ODOT that we were finally able to negotiate for potential redevelopment at some point. And it's also important to point out that the buildings that they're rehabbing right now on 9th Street have been in disrepair and underutilized. So as Laura mentioned, parking is not required, but we all know the reality of everybody drives cars. So in order to be able to facilitate redevelopment of those buildings on 9th Street, this is a need for the time being.
And then just as a reminder, it has nothing to do with the case. When they came through to rezone this property into downtown, there was a total of 3 properties. One's at 13th in Oklahoma, and the southernmost one is down at 6th and Harrison and Walnut, and I don't remember the name of all of those at that really bizarre intersection in Oklahoma, south of this one. So we potentially are going to have 3 sites come in for development at some point that had been part of DOT's right-of-way.
Questions for the applicant? Action.
Make a motion to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report, with the condition, that's correct, all this is
did I
correct?
say
Yeah,
the
with the condition the sidewalk takes priority over the parking lot, entrance, exit drives. The elevation of the sidewalk shall remain constant and the entrance, exit drives designed to angle up or down meet this elevation. Also, the sidewalk will need to be demarcated in some way across the drives. This can be done with color, texture, or lines indicating the east and west edges of the sidewalk.
Second?
Mariana Sarur, second.
So, yeah, and Mariana made the second on that
Thank
one.
you.
And I'm really sorry that I didn't go into detail about why you saw a condition you've probably never seen before. During review of this, they made a lot of changes, and then I realized, oh darn, I forgot to say something about the sidewalk. And so it's like, I'll just make it a condition because you don't need to redo your drawings at this point. So that is typically what we're looking at for sidewalks, that the sidewalk takes priority and driveways have to meet it, whatever, and then the sidewalk gets marked across it so you can clearly see where your sidewalk is.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
Everybody will vote, please. Motion doing something. Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Next, application DTCA-23-00026 at 1 Myriad Gardens. Staff?
So this is a request from Prairie Surf Studios to basically have 2 super graphic banners, which typically staff would be approving, and we do them all the time, and you've seen them out there for, sometimes it's for concerts coming up, or whenever the Thunder ends up in playoff games, you would see them for that as well, and you see them on different buildings in Bricktown and in downtown. But in this case, they're wanting to put a couple of them up and change them out throughout the year. So basically, they would become permanent. And so it had to come before you because they need a variance and the sizes. So what we're looking at here is we're on Reno, and we're across the street, and we're looking north at the main entrance. And so on either side of that main entrance, what they're wanting to do is put these up. They're 1,312 square foot apiece. We're basically approving them as blanks, and what that means is that we're not approving a specific message, so that their intent is to put it up for films they're working on, films that are getting ready to, hit the, however you view it, we'll say the movie theater, so you can go and see it. And they would change them out throughout the year. And so approving it as blanks allows them to do that without coming back to us every single time. And so there are several sections of the code that they need variances from, and they are on the Board of Adjustment agenda for this afternoon for these. I list the extensions to CAs. So you can't grant extensions for the super graphic signs, and they're only allowed for 4 times a year, and they're based on the dates of an event, or they can be up for 6 weeks. And so there's a lot of stuff when I went in to try to pull all this together to see how many different sections that they needed variances from. They also need a variance from the maximum size of signs that they're allowed to have. And I indicated that they're allowed to have 580 square foot of signage on that facade. And currently, they have 570. That's the Prairie Surf Studio sign, where it used to say, I'm thinking Myriad Gardens, I'm sorry, that was before that, where it used to say, was it Cox, whatever it said there, yeah. And so they would actually need a variance if they wanted to put up a sign that was more than 10 square feet at the moment, because they're almost maxed out. They indicated and provided some pictures of the use of these in Hollywood by some of the studios where they literally have a bunch. They're only asking for 2, but they showed a building that had several all along the road, and they were all about different movies. Now that they've actually filmed a few movies here in town, and they make Channel 9 where they do that almost, I don't know if you saw that last week when they were trying to figure out what the heck was going on down with that blue screen in that building that was being built, and they were doing it like they were investigative reporters, and they were running around trying to figure out what it is. There's a lot of interest in what's going on, and there's a lot of support for what's happening with the movie industry here. And so they're wanting to actually say, hey, we're working on this, or this is getting ready to come out. Plus, there's all these opportunities for locals to become extras in movies, which is kind of cool. So, as I said, we typically have 2 to 4 of these temporary super graphics on the building, and people are used to seeing them. Up and down 6 to 8 weeks at a time. And I honestly don't think it's going to look any different than it did before. But to be quite honest, it's going to be a lot easier on staff because we're not constantly having to issue approval. all the time. And even though we don't normally support more signage than allowed, this is a really large building, and the current sign allowance really doesn't address the fact that this is a really large building, and when you look at it proportionally, these are not going to look out of scale to the building. And we really have no objection to what they're proposing. So we are recommending approval. We have the condition about needing the variance from the Board of Adjustment, from the time limits on super graphics, and from the maximum allowable sign area. And then we need to provide a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment. So there's two motions. We do have a representative here from Prairie Surf Studios. If you have any questions about the application, although he might entertain other questions, otherwise, do you have questions for staff?
I have a question, actually. So if we approve the blinks, my mom brain is going off a little bit of how do we make sure what's on the graphic is okay, appropriate? And then also, I love these, first off. I think this is going to be super cool. The community is always wondering what's happening inside. So I think this would be a really cool glimpse of what's happening in the theater world and in the film industry in Oklahoma City. So I love these. I'm just curious, how do we regulate what's on them?
So I'm going to have to defer to legal, but we have very limited ability, if any, about content. Okay, I'm saying it correctly?
Totally agree with that.
Okay. And so from that perspective, that's when they submit it to me and it's a concert coming up, that's not why I'm looking at it. You know, when somebody submits a super graphic, I'm looking, is it 14 foot up from the bottom? Is it at least 100 square feet? What's the material it's made of? When is this event? When is it going up? When is it coming down? And that's really all I'm looking at. So I understand your question, but that's not really something that we can.
So this may be a good time for the applicant to come up and talk about that.
While he's
Say,
walking
please.
up, I'll just note, there are rules and regulations about obscene content that wouldn't be DDRC's role to enforce. That would be a code enforcement issue. So in that category, there are some protections in place about what goes up. So.
That's all I was wondering. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Good morning, Loudon Baker, staff representative for Prairie Surf Media and Prairie Surf Studios. Yes, first of all, thank you for your time. Thank you, Laura, for all that you've done to sort of prepare us for this specific meeting. And also, I wanted to just reiterate how happy and proud we are to exist in downtown Oklahoma City. It is a privilege of our company to operate and do business there. I just want to say a couple things, and then I'll address your question head on. Essentially, this signage speaks to what you said. It is to better communicate to our community and our visitors what exactly is going on in our 1.3 million square foot facility, as well as provide a visual anchor so that people, when they're hearing about these high value productions, they know where they're being made. And then the second is to sort of facilitate opportunities for community engagement and excitement. As Laura had mentioned, there is so much buzz around our growing and thriving film industry currently. This will just give them a visual sort of to collaborate with the key role that we're doing in quality storytelling right from the heart of downtown. And then Kayla, to speak to your point regarding content, our CEOs, Rachel and Matt, are Oklahomans. They're very involved in local organizations, boards, community. We have a very good finger on the pulse of what it means to be an Oklahoman, and those values. Rachel is a mom of a 6-year-old. So these banners are really an opportunity to share what's going on, but I can guarantee you that we're not out trying to, no pun intended, make waves with the content that will be on these banners. The goal would be something that would create excitement and not dissension.
Other questions?
If we grant permanent approval of a larger sign, is that tied to the building address permanently or the tenant within the building permanently?
It's tied to the building. So if they moved out because they built themselves a new, even bigger facility, that current building would still have that.
Can we make it a condition of our motion that it is tied to the tenant?
I think the easiest thing, perhaps you could put a time restriction on it. Tell me what you think of this, something like 2 years or 3 years or something like that, some sort of durational cap.
Or would that be something Board of Adjustment could do for the variance?
Yeah.
That they have to, after, I mean, one of the next ones on our agenda today is asking for a 3-year time limit on a, or no, that's not today. We did that the other day.
No, you did that last
Yeah,
week. That was River.
last week. But Board of Adjustment, I think, has the ability to do that. And not that they couldn't get it again, but that way at least we're
Yeah.
revisiting.
So I have found some, not from you guys, I have found some applications in the past from River that they did a time limit on. You know, and I found it like, oh, that thing expired 3 years ago. From that standpoint, I guess we can do a time limit. It doesn't address it in our regulations and guidelines, so I don't know the answer to that question.
Could it be tied to the current lease?
Largely, it's going to be the same as a time limit.
That's still a
right?
time, yeah. And I'm sorry, I didn't anticipate this question coming up, so I hadn't looked into it.
You're good, Laura. We're good.
Also, who would enforce the time limit?
And that's the other issue. There was one in downtown that Board of Adjustment granted for a specified time period. You all had issued a CA. It was a parking lot without landscaping. And they issued it for a specified amount of time, and the date came and went, and that was 4 or 5 years ago, and the parking lot's still there. It's still in operation. So the problem with that is, how do you enforce that? Because we're not the enforcers.
Additional questions, comments? We have a motion. Is there a motion?
No, we have a motion? Did I miss that? Oh, you said, okay, I'm sorry. I thought we had one.
Since there were no additional questions,
I got you. You're saying, do we have a motion?
it would be nice to get a motion.
But we could make a motion and push to the Board of Adjustments recommendation that they address the time constraint of this, or can that be a part of the second motion?
In that second motion,
Motion.
Recommend approval to the Board of Adjustment for a variance from the time limits. Effectively, number 2, for a limited,
For a specified amount of
for a
time.
specified amount of time or whatever, if you have a specific recommendation.
I will be advising their staff as soon as this meeting's over with, I'm sure they're watching, so they're going to know, but I'll go back to the office, send them an email so they have it, what happened, so they will have it before them for the afternoon's meeting.
I think it's appropriate to give you the flexibility to promote your product and to reduce Laura's burden on reviewing these every 3 months. But I would like to make sure that if someday you're so successful, you've moved out of downtown and some new tenant moves in, and we have granted them a massive sign on the side of their building that is inappropriate given the new tenant, I'd like to make sure that we protect ourselves from that. And by ourselves, I mean
100%
Oklahoma City.
agree.
So I'd like to entertain that idea on the motion.
So back to the tenant then?
Well, I think just a time frame. So we could just say it's a 5-year limit. You can re-up again in 5 years, and I think that's appropriate.
So I think I heard legal saying you could, talking about adding it to the recommendation to the Board of Adjustment.
Correct.
Were you also talking about adding it to, adding a condition to number 1?
It seems to me number 1 would be okay, and it would be based on that variance, right? That where they would be the limiting.
Right.
You're recommending approval, but hey, consider, and if you want to specify 5 or 3 or whatever, or just you could even just say recommend approval, yada yada yada, and consider a time restraint.
Or could it be
generally.
Or could they just say for a maximum of 5 years?
You could, yeah, as specific or general as you care to make your recommendation to the Board of Adjustment.
And I would lean on less time, 3 years. Just thinking of what would want to take that building, and would we really want them advertising? It wouldn't be an appropriate advertisement for certain uses.
So if the building were ever torn down and a new building was built for some purpose, would that variance remain?
Well, it's tied to the building, right?
Yeah, so if the building is gone,
Right,
it's gone.
because hopefully we'll fix the address if at any point, because no one knows where the heck Myriad Garden Street,
Yeah,
Road,
it's-
whatever it is. Yeah, okay, I just wanted to ask that
Could
question.
I ask a question? If we are leaning toward the 3-year timeframe, our current lease is through December of 2027. So if that is where we are leaning, I would just ask that if we could make it through the duration of our current lease, so we don't, I don't know where we'll be in 3 years, hopefully
I think
thriving
we
and
can give you
surviving and,
4 years, since that's what it would be,
okay.
if that's okay.
I'm going to move to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District Zoning Ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report, with the condition that the applicant obtains a variance from the Board of Adjustment from the time limits on super graphics and from the maximum allowable sign area regulations.
Do I have a second? We have a
Mariana.
motion and a second. Please vote. Motion passes.
Thank you.
We have another motion needed for this action.
And I'll provide a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustments for a variance from the time limits on super graphics and from the maximum allowable sign area regulations contingent upon a time frame no greater than 4 years.
Okay, so if we do a time frame of 4 years, that gets you to June of 2027. They're there till December of 2027. So what if we say until the end,
Till the
end of calendar
until
year
the close of
2027?
Yes, until the close of calendar year of 2027.
I'm just suggesting,
Yeah,
so,
that's fine.
okay.
Everybody's okay with contingent upon? Okay, it's my motion.
Okay, we need a second. We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next on the agenda, we have other business, which is CE 01103 at 1100 North Hudson Avenue. Staff?
Okay, thank you. And we'll let the record show that Eric Schmid recused himself. So we have a request for all of those areas that you see outlined in black. Some of them are for alleys. We've got east-west alleys, we have north-south alleys. We have part of Park Place, and in one case, we have all of the right-of-way of Park Place. And so this is basically kind of a 3-block area, because that one block is a really strange shape and has, the roads are kind of offset. So the request came for, specifically, they said, what was attached, was for the new Family Justice Center, and the MAPS office was one of the applicants. And so that is the block. Let me get this here, and I've lost my mouse. There it was. Anyway, that is the block that's on the left, that's on the west. So that is where that proposed facility is going. This application is also including the block and a half on the east, and that is why one of the applicants is Midtown, because they happen to own all of that. So, in no particular order, when you look at this, you have some alleys that are only 10 foot wide, which you're thinking, why in the world did they even plat it at 10 foot wide? So that is non-functioning alley. On the right, you have a 20-foot wide alley. Okay, great. But it's only connected to the two 10-foot alleys, and you can't get to the street. So you can't really do anything with the alleys that are shown over on that side. And from that standpoint, it does seem logical to support closing and vacating those because they are totally non-functioning. And we have that. We have alleys from 10. I just found some that are 14-foot wide. We have 15-foot wide. 20-foot is the minimum, and even that's tight because we end up with power poles in the alley, which take up room. So on the block where the Family Justice Center is going, the proposal to vacate part of Park Place that you see was previously done with another CE, but they never carried it forward to do the vacation. So right now is when they're like, well, let's just include them all at the same time, and we're going to carry them forward, and we're going to do a process that allows us to close it and vacate it and get this done. And so in talking with the applicants, one, we weren't provided with any of the information on the Family Justice Center, probably due to where that project was at the time we started talking to them. But obviously, that will have to come to you guys for a CA at some point when it gets submitted, and that is a MAPS 4 project. We did discuss with the property owners of the property on the east, and let me get to, this is the one where I did it. No, so this is just a blow up of that, but I'm trying to get to the one where I did the red lines. There it is. So in talking with the applicants on this, one of the issues staff has is, well, back of house. You always hear about how are you going to deal with back of house, which is trash pickup, which is deliveries. And that is always our concern when the alleys get vacated. So we included wording, which we had worked out several years ago when we did some stuff down off Walker, about back of house uses, and they need to incorporate back of house uses and we'll be reviewing it when they come through with their CA, because we don't want those right in your face on the street. The second thing that we talked to them about was pedestrian access, because when you close that much, including a street, you want pedestrians to be able to get through there. And so when you look at this view, you see the traffic circle on 10th, and that is where Classen Drive has been closed and vacated. And so that's becoming a whole pedestrian plaza. So it's like, okay, that's great at one end. And then when you look over, there it is. This is Robinson. It's all the way on the east side. So you might remember, if you've ever gone to the Garage restaurant, there's like this, I don't know, it kind of looks European, because it almost looks like, hey, I've got this paved street, but you can't drive on it because it's just got tables. Okay, so that was closed to allow that pedestrian access. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to continue that so that we could literally get pedestrians, hopefully, in a perfect world, all the way from Robinson down to Classen Drive. And so that's what you're seeing here with these red lines that I'm showing. And so what we talked to them about was when they come through for development adjacent to potentially vacated Park Place in this area, we're going to end up with some pedestrian pathway through there. We talked to them about that as well down this area park, because right now there is angled parking, but there's no sidewalk on the north side because of the topography. But I think there will be modifications to that block when they do this new project. And so we would be able to get it, we're looking at getting that access way through there. So from that standpoint, this is a plus for the area so that we can get the pedestrian access. So staff, from that perspective, we felt this could be a positive at this point. We don't necessarily know the layout. What they've indicated to us on the Family Justice Center block is that the buildings that are along Walker, because there's a couple older buildings, and I can never remember the name of the one where the restaurant closed, which is like the Adobe Spanish style up here at 11th, you know what I'm talking about? That one, and then the brick to the south, that they've indicated that those are going to remain, which we're really glad, because that's still some of the historic character of the Midtown area. So staff has a very huge recommendation here with all of the blocks and the street names. I'm sorry, you guys get to read it. And we have a couple of conditions listed in there, that the owner/developer provides to the city an access easement across the applicant's property for the purpose of providing public access for pedestrians to and from North Harvey Avenue and North Hudson Avenue. The location of said easement will be required at the time of the redevelopment of the property, which abuts the vacated portion of West Park Place between North Harvey and North Hudson. And so that's the block I was talking about right in here. That would be immediately north of, it'll always be Blue Garden, because I can't remember what it's called now. North of Blue Garden. The second one is that the owner-developer provides for access to back-of-house functions internal to the development on the site plan for future development required to be submitted for downtown design district approval. And we do have representatives for this project here.
Do we have questions for staff? Applicant?
Good afternoon, Mark Zidzow with Johnson & Associates. Brian Fitzsimmons is here as well, representing the project. And so Laura did, I think, a great job kind of summing this application up. It's a bit of a unique scenario here in that we're using what's known as the urban renewal vacation process. If it's an urban renewal project or if it meets their guidelines and the urban renewal intent, what it allows for is to go through the closure process with vacation at City Council. Typically, we'd be going to district court. So all those applications are in staff's hands and are under review. We did work with staff to come up with these two TEs that are relative to what would be the eastern portion of this application. Laura noted that much of the existing alley network is not functional based on what current codes are and minimum fire width. So we think that portion on the northern piece of that block is clear. On Park Place, we are seeking that vacation. We are committed to the 10-foot pedestrian easement that will go through and be decided at the time of redevelopment. That's been triggered by when development occurs adjacent to that alley is when that easement would be granted. Part of the reason we did that was because the site plan's still being worked on, still being refined. It's not entirely known exactly where that easement can be located. So rather than tether that block to an exact location, we'll be bringing that before you at the time of redevelopment. At the end of the day, we think it's going to create a very nice pedestrian pathway all the way back to Robinson by Garage Burgers and the Lingo office. It's not perfectly aligned, and that's partially because of the roundabout, where the other vacations have taken place on Park Place on the north side of Brown's Bakery. So in the end, we think all the correct pedestrian connections are going to be made, and it'll still be a very safe, walkable urban district. The other thing that I'll mention is there have been a lot of CEs in this area and along Park Place with Garage Burgers and that development. There were vacations that were done there, and then also south of the dog park. Because we're using the Ocura vacation process, we've included that back in this application, even though it had previously been approved. So I'm happy to answer any questions specifically about the family justice portion that's coming, but one of the great things about CEs in the downtown area is you'll all be able to see exactly how the site plan comes together, the pedestrian area and the public realm, as well as trash access and everything else. So on our end, we're not worried that we won't be able to commit to these things, and you all be the backstop for that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for the applicant? Motion?
I will move to provide a recommendation of approval for the Planning Commission for the request to close the right-of-way for West Park Place between North Harvey Avenue and North Hudson Avenue, portions of the right-of-way for West Park Place between North Hudson Avenue and North Walker Avenue, and the alleyways located between North Walker Avenue, Northwest 11th Street, North Harvey Avenue, Northwest 10th Street, North Hudson Avenue, and West Park Place, with the conditions that A, the owner developer provides to the City of Oklahoma City an access easement across the applicant's property for the purpose of providing public access for pedestrians to and from North Harvey Avenue and North Hudson Avenue. The location of said easement will be required at the time of redevelopment of the property, which abuts the vacated portion of West Park Place between North Harvey and North Hudson Avenue. And B, the owner developer provides for access to the back of house functions internal to the development on the site plan for future development required to be submitted for downtown design district approval.
Second,
Brannon, second.
please vote. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. We'll wait for Eric to get back. All right. Next on the agenda is SPUD, SPUD 01535 at 415 Northwest 5th Street. Staff?
Was faster than I was.
Sorry.
Okay, so I emailed you a couple of days ago that we had gotten a request to continue this item. You have the staff report, you have the protest document that was submitted. The attorney representing this application is here. And I'm looking for direction as far as, do we just let the attorney come up and speak to the request for the continuance?
So if there are no objections, we have received the communications. I think we can go ahead and hear the attorney's presentation. We can ask questions at that time, and then we can decide what we'd like to do moving forward.
Okay, so this is a presentation on the continuance?
That is correct.
Okay.
David Box, 522 Colcord
Oh,
Drive.
before you go, are there no objections? Go
So
ahead, David. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Ideally, I'd spare everyone an hour-long tale. We got a bunch of protest letters. When matters like this go before Planning Commission, City Council, which is where this will ultimately go, it's almost a requirement that we defer the item to go have a meeting with the interested parties. We do have a meeting set up next Monday with a gentleman named Mark Henriksen, who alleges to be an attorney for various folks that are involved. I know there's at least one person here. So the reason for the request is to defer it, to allow a meeting to take place to see if some sort of solution could be reached. So happy to answer any questions on that piece of it.
Are there any questions? There are none, but what I think would be appropriate at this time is we do
Yes.
have a couple of individuals that have come to
Yes,
speak.
and both of these people I've spoken with previously, and
Okay.
so, Mr. Berryman?
Hello, my name is Mike Berryman, and I am at 426 Northwest 5th Street, which is right across the street from the property at issue here. And so I would urge this body to go against the continuance today, simply because this property has been in violation of the zoning code now for the past 2 years. It has come up before this board, or was definitely on its way to being advanced as a zoning change 2 years ago. That effort was dropped somewhere along the way, as I understand it. And for the last 2 years, me being a property owner across the street and numerous property owners all around the perimeter of this particular subject property have been trying to have the city do something about the issue of property being out of zoning compliance for the last couple of years. And during that time, we have put up with some very adverse situations, conditions. And only recently has the city been successful in issuing, as I understand it, a citation for this property and its non-conformance. And that has brought us to the point today where there has been a new application for rezoning put in place. And as a result of that, the citation, as I understand it, they're standing down, and so the violation continues as we speak. And so we're really interested in moving forward as expeditiously as possible in order to have the city bring this property into compliance with the current zoning code.
Mike, if I could ask a question, is that you indicated that they've been out of violation for the last 2 years, and it's just only recently that the city has been able to cite them for the violation. Is that correct?
Yes, there have been numerous complaints made over the last couple of years, not only by us, but other property owners, basically in a 360-degree orientation to the property. And mostly the response we've received from the city is that they can't do anything unless they visually or auditorily or with their other 5 senses can actually visualize the problem itself. And so we've had a difficult time getting enforcement because of that, and only recently has that been successful. And as a result of that success, citation has been issued, and that's prompted the applicant to start up a rezoning application again.
So then my follow-up question would be, it's clear that the applicant is now wanting to sit down and discuss what the issues are. Has there been an effort to meet with the applicant before, and has that been accepted, or there has not been any effort for that conversation to occur?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because as just trying to be good neighbors over the last couple of years, even though we've realized that it's out of compliance, we have tried to work with the tenant who's in the facility in order to just express concerns that we have and how detrimental it's been to our businesses, to try to work something out just among neighbors to make it where we can all live together, and that's been very unsuccessful. They've been very non-responsive in that regard, and so I don't hold out hope that there's an ability to seek a compromise there.
Okay. Are there other questions for the person speaking in public comments? Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
We have someone else, is that correct, Laura?
Mm-hmm.
Are you supposed to announce your name? Okay. Does everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Rick Dowell with Dowell Properties. Just so you know, this problem came before your board here 2 years ago, and you voted not to recommend approval. And given the amount of controversy that this thing stirred up, I think it was Mr. Bach Sr. decided to withdraw the application. What you have here is a case of just clear violation of the law that's gone on for 2 years. The solution is very simple. In other words, if the people merely enclosed the dog park, which I'm a general contractor, would be about $50,000, they'd be within the requirements of the zoning that they already possess. And I think the problem would just go away. So really, it's a $50,000 problem that's easily remediated by the owner of the building. Of course, that costs a little bit of money. So you said, well, that sounds like a lot of money. Well, let's look at it this way. Your packet would have contained today these 7 property owners that are protesting this situation. And there's also a spreadsheet in there that shows the current assessed value by the county of the properties that are complaining, and it's $20 million. And as a person that operates office buildings, I can tell you this, that a problem such as this can easily reduce the value of this adjoining property by 10 or 15, 20%. Just a 1% reduction in the value of $20 million worth of property is $200,000. That's 4 times the cost of just the applicant solving the problem. And that's basically been the issue. I'm a general contractor. I've given advice on how this can be done to no avail. And so what's happening by this process, starting in the middle of the summer where most people are on vacation, I think the intent was that this could just slip through. But people are so aggravated that in spite of the fact that some of them were on vacation, they came back and filled out the forms and did the whole thing. The delay is just increasing the time that people have to put up with the problem. And to give you an idea how severe the problem is, I had a law firm that I was moving into the building that's adjacent to the dog park, and so they'd already signed a lease. But then they came over there to their telephone guy to install their telephone equipment, and he reported back to the people that had hired me, you know, this dog sure making an awful lot of racket over there. Then I got a call from the tenant saying, well, we're not sure we want to move there or not. Now, normally they would sign a 5-year lease. They only signed a 1-year lease because I guess they want to, and I told them, well, we're going to get this problem solved one way or the other. But just the loss of 1 lease is worth maybe $500,000. So I just hope, I know that our people were told not to show up because it was going to get a continuance and there's really not much we can do about it. But I hope that if another continuance is asked for, that you guys certainly don't allow it, because we just can't go on any longer like this. And like I say, the problem and the solution is so simple.
Thank you. Yeah, David, go ahead and respond.
Since we're spinning narratives real quick, one of the issues that my client faces is prior to moving forward with renovating the building, they did what prudent tenants, landowners, property owners do. They sat down and met with staff. I have clients in all shapes and sizes. Some are knowingly in violation. Some come to me before to go fix it. This person did what I would have done. They sat down with staff. Only after getting written and verbal assurances from staff that their use was in compliance with zoning did they move forward with the lease and then spend a significant amount of money on the building. They did all that through permits. So now the city's telling us, well, sorry, we made a mistake. We issued permits in error. So in 2020, we filed a zoning application. We came here. There was discovered by someone in staff that actually we think the use is permitted if the dogs are on leashes. So my client said, well, great. We can do that. We'll make that an operational requirement that dogs are on leashes. So we withdrew the zoning case. The third time it became a problem is the current time. And when it came to me again, I said, well, I have a few questions. We have the 9th Street Barking Lodge, which has the same zoning as us, and they have an outdoor area just like us. We have Midtown Vets. Midtown Vets is a boarding facility where they keep dogs overnight. How are those uses operational in the exact same zoning category that we have? What we were told was, whoops, we the city made a mistake and we granted an impermissible use variance to the 9th Street Barking Lodge. I said, well, great. We'd love the same type of treatment that the 9th Street Barking Lodge had. And they say, well, sorry, we can't do that. The answer for Midtown Vets is, well, because they don't have an outdoor run, the employees just wander the dogs throughout downtown to use the restroom. And that's the distinction. That's okay. So we're hoping to find a solution. The narrative being spun is that you have this derelict tenant that's just simply flying in the face of the zoning code. I don't think that that's fair. My client did everything that a prudent developer would do, and it was only after getting permits issued by the city, written and verbal assurances from the city that their use is permitted under its current zoning, did they pull the trigger and go through and spend all the money to retrofit the building. So we want the continuance. We want to go try to find a way to make all of this work. Perhaps there are some operational things my client can do to make that possible, but at least wanted to leave the commission with that I don't know what more a property owner can do other than speak to the city time and time again and get assurances that they're okay, only to be told, sorry, we were wrong.
Members, questions?
I appreciate hearing the second part.
questions? So, as you know, before us, we can move to continue, or we can go with the staff recommendation as far as any actions, but the staff specifically was asking us to come up with what we think the next action should be. So that puts us in the position that we need to make a decision on how we want to proceed. I would note that, and I totally understand the frustration that both Mike and Loudon have brought up, Mike and Rick, excuse me, that we have gone with continuances in hopes that resolutions can be resolved through meeting. And my hope is that we continue with that, because I think that's probably the best way to facilitate this is dialogue. And if that is not the case, then of course it's on us to make a decision to move forward one way or the other.
I agree completely. If this can be resolved and brought back to us, that's the process working the way it's supposed to. So I'm in favor of a continuance, and if there's no objection, I'll make the
Okay, there's a motion to move this to continue.
Continue to a date certain, and that would be July 20th, if you're continuing it for a month. Is that what
okay for
your
Mr. Box?
request was for, a month? Okay.
Okay, make a motion to continue this until the July 20th
July 20th, yes.
Date.
Okay, is there a second?
Copeland, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote.
And Keith, you'll have to announce the vote because the screen isn't showing up.
It
Which is
passed
fine.
unanimously.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. I'm sorry.
There you go. Motion
Okay,
passes.
okay.
The item has been continued. Next on the agenda, and we want to thank everybody for coming out today. Next on the agenda is the election of a chair.
So I am so glad that everybody showed up today.
It is. That
So
makes
you
it
don't have
fair.
the excuse that you weren't here and you got elected.
Yes. And so I would say that I have loved being chair. I felt that it was my time to step up and move into that position. I have completed my year. My hope is that it is time for the next person to move up and take their time as chair.
Hint, hint. Okay.
Yes.
100% agree. I think it's important for everybody to go through chair and vice chair, because it's infinitely valuable to both the committee itself and to each individual person. So I mean, I would like if Justin would be willing to be chair.
I think that is a great way of creating a pipeline, since Justin's currently our vice chair.
Correct.
Of course, we wouldn't want to do anything that Justin wouldn't, but Justin is nodding in the affirmative. Sure. Okay.
So
We
I'll make-
actually had discussion several years ago, when I think Tony might be the only one that's still on it, about revising the bylaws to include a process where it would go, the vice chair would become the chair and a new person would be and so it would cycle through like that, so everybody would get an opportunity to do that, but it never went anywhere, so.
All right, so we have a motion for Justin to be chair. Do I have a second? We have a second. Please vote.
I'm sorry, who made the second?
Rosie.
Oh, that was Rosie. Motions passes. Justin,
Thank you.
congratulations. All right. Next, we need to elect a vice chair.
Now it's your turn, Justin.
Yeah.
Because you're not the chair yet, so you can make a motion.
I do think it's important that individuals who haven't had the opportunity to be vice chair be given that opportunity. And I wish that I would have had some conversations before today.
Does anyone just elect themselves to vice chair? I mean, is
can
that
you-
possible to do?
Well,
Or is it entertained by someone else?
I would love to see either Kayla or Rosie or Mariana. Were you? Okay. Kayla, would you entertain?
Yay! So we have a motion from Tony for Kayla to be vice chair. Do I have a second?
Brandon, second.
All right. So
Because there's a script, I'm
th-
good.
there's a script to start the meeting. Everything else is on you.
I want to clarify that, and only because of your time.
Yeah.
And that means you'll roll off, because I would hope, I mean, the only reason why I would want, when Eric is chair, it's going to be challenging because he won't be able to make motions the same way.
Yeah.
And that's going to be, because his voice is going to be extremely important. So, but he'll have his time.
So Tony, thank you for that, because that is a little bit of the frustration of being chair, is that you can't actively engage in motions the way you would normally do so. And I'm going to be honest with you, I actually missed that part of it, because that was the part that I actually enjoyed. So it will be great to get back to that.
There we go.
There you go. So please vote.
You vote for yourself.
Motion passes. Kayla? Woo-hoo. So with that moves us to communications. We have our administrative approval report. Are there any questions for staff?
First National is in the running for the most revisions during a project. Because we're up to, we have 7.
Wow.
Done 7, but it's a big project.
It is.
But there's a lot of things, so I don't know if anybody has any questions. Remember, we didn't have a meeting last month because Channel 9 Studios agreed that they would go to June because they weren't going to the Board of Adjustment until today, so they didn't lose anything.
Nope.
So you guys got a month off.
Woo-hoo.
But that kind of leads to the next thing, which we have a meeting next month.
So there's no,
Oh,
you guys have anything else besides that?
no, I mean, did anybody have any questions about any of the
Committee
AAs?
members? Now you can go
Okay,
ahead.
we have a meeting next month, so since we're into vacation season, I'll probably send out an early quorum call, just to make sure that we're gonna have a quorum. We have an extra week. June has 5 Thursdays, and we love it when we have that extra week, so
Hey,
we get kind of an off week.
we do. So with that, the announcement of the next committee date, we are ready to, Eric? Oh, I thought you had your hand up. Okay, with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.